Hello, everybody, and welcome to the SOFA series Artist Spotlight. This is our third one so far, and today we are with Carolina Montejo, who is another interdisciplinary artist. But at this point, like everybody is interdisciplinary, right? We all do a little bit of everything. And she performed this beautiful performance piece at Working Title at the tree out in the front lawn. So, welcome, Carolina.
Hi,
Hi.
thank you for the
Yay!
introduction.
Thanks for being here in my computer with me.
Mhm. Thanks for being in your room.
Thank you. So let's start with a little bit of an introduction. Where are you from, and how did you get to California? And are you still in San Diego right now?
Yes, I was born in Colombia and I lived in Colombia for most of my life. I am Colombian American now. Um, and I got to San Diego because my husband, oh, of course, there's a plane going by. I hope it's not too
It's
noticeable.
okay. It's okay.
Um, So my husband is from San Diego, and we moved here about 5 years ago. We wanted to get our master's degrees, and so we came here and we did just that. So I am a second year MFA candidate at UCSD, and that's where I've been making a lot of art recently.
Yeah. Well, okay, so you're a second year, and this is now your final quarter because UCSD is on the quarter system for those who don't know, which means that every quarter for me felt like I was sprinting, uh,
But
like nonstop.
going down a slide.
Yeah, there's no breathing room, no time to relax and absorb some material. It's just like, phew, here we go. So are you defending your thesis? Are you still able to present a thesis show? How is that working now that everything is mediated?
Well, I'm actually I'll have one more year to go because it's
Oh,
3 years for the visual arts MFA. So
okay,
I am going to be finishing just my second year right now at the end of this
great.
quarter, and we'll still luckily have one more year to work on my thesis.
Okay, good. So that's not affecting your end game too much, I hope.
No,
Okay.
it is hard for those who are finishing right now. It definitely changes things, and you had a certain expectation, and art, I mean, a lot of things really work best with interaction in person. So it's
It's tough.
been, yeah, kind of a downer. But
Yeah. Yeah. Well, how so my my response, I've been sort of diving through your website and your statement and have landed and have been just sort of staring at this your manifesto for
Mhm.
days now. I think it's one of the most beautiful things I've ever heard, and I think it's sort of really appropriate and prescient for this very, 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 very time right now. And I'm wondering, so a little bit about your work is that you are interrogating the ways that like humans and plants and the sort of terra, the earth and humans interact and are at odds. And I'm wondering, how did you come to this in your practice? Was there like a pre-form of your work that, I don't know, interrogated the color pink? I don't know. Was there, or had you always been singularly driven towards earth and plant?
um, not necessarily. I guess when I started my work, like about, I started really going into art in like 2007,
Hmm.
after I graduated from my bachelor from college in Colombia, where I got a bachelor's in communication. So
Oh.
I was I was very interested in symbols always, semiotics and all of my communications background obviously and ends up like still influencing my work now. But I was interested mostly in symbols and did photography mostly for about 8 years.
Hmm.
And but it always felt like there was something that I was ready to explore beyond the image, because I've also been a writer, just like a writer on my own, kind of terms, not like publishing or anything. And so the writing really was the one that opened up this world of exploring like journeys. And I think that that's how I really got to thinking about Earth in other ways, and to thinking about like just journeys to inner and outer space. And that was all through my writing. And with the series that kind of launched everything was the series for which I wrote that manifesto that you were reading, which was called Mission Series. And that was definitely a project that just changed everything for me and allowed me to arrive at UCSD as well, because that was like my portfolio when I came in. And so, yeah, just I'm interested in just digging deep. And I guess when you dig deep, you get deep into the earth, because where else are you going to get, right?
Where else?
Yeah. And then I started, I guess, more interested in landscape, um, and in interpretations and views and experiences of landscape, and thinking too about the world that we live in and the environment, and how it's part of us, and how there's something sacred and something just so mundane, and all of these layers of meaning and of experience that landscape has. And then I started just going in, from the satellite vision that was Mission Series, and just started zooming in and going more into just biology, I guess.
So, well, first of all, you're incredible at naming your pieces, and so I like the wordplay of series, calling it like though it is serial, right? Because there are several videos in the series, but it is spelled CERES, and you can see the videos on her website, Friends, and but it's named after the Roman goddess of agriculture, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm going through this, and so can you explain a little bit more about the what is the acronym CALI?
Oh yes, Kali.
Yeah.
So Kali is the character, the artificial intelligence character that I built for Mission Series, and it means containing all landscape information. Because in the story behind Mission Series, this kind of group of scholars and scientists and people like put together this creature, which is like a sentient AI that holds all this information. Not all information, of course, but I just really became obsessed with that name. And yeah, and that's what it means. And going back to what you were saying with Ceres, yeah, Ceres is, the goddess of agriculture, and Ceres has been coming back to my work. I recently did a piece that was very influenced by the relationship between Ceres and Prosperina, or that's the Roman, but then I forget it's escaping my mind right now. Um, the Greek correspondence to that. But because I was really interested last quarter in like the relationship between the mother and the daughter, and that relationship between the earth and all creatures. And so I did this performance at the same time that I did the one at Project Blank. That was more about like the birth of this creature that goes from plant to human. But in the case of
Wait, hang on. This creature.
yeah, my work is
No
really
big deal.
expansive like that. Like I was talking today during a studio visit that I had, which was really amazing, and about how much I'm interested in like digging deep and in finding these kind of root systems and entanglements, and how those things kind of go back into the work in some way or other, in unexpected ways, really also for me. Because with Mission Series, I was thinking also not only of agriculture, but I was thinking of the planet, of this dwarf planet Ceres, that's kind of
Right.
like it, it's it's one of those planets that's like even sillier than Pluto, because at least Pluto some at some point was considered something, you know. But Ceres is kind of like just this kind of just, you know, rock.
Yeah,
This
yeah.
tiny
I was
rock.
reading like it's also sometimes classified as just like a little asteroid
Yeah,
that
it's
is
just like a,
just this
yeah.
perfectly round little thing.
But there
Uh,
are all these studies around it, and so it really made me want to speculate on what that rock could be. And so in my mind, eventually this artificial intelligence, just by being hit with all this space debris, turns into Ceres.
oh my
So,
God.
you know, Ceres is like in the middle, has this like artificial intelligent, like, you know, like creature living in there that is
Yeah.
never going to be found in a way.
But Ceres, the dwarf planet, is going to be reborn anyway, right? That she gets this new identity floating through space as a semi-sentient thing, whether it's
Yeah,
artificial or
or organic in
or
some way.
yeah, yeah. And so what? And you do all of the voiceover writing, all of the. So one of the I think in the first one you sort of intersperse the like mundane task of just washing dishes in the sink, and I don't know. You're saying it sounds like you're just like so anyway, just kind of having a very casual conversation, but then there's these other layers of observation, which I think is coming from the bot, right? And so how are you considering in the way that you kind of intersperse these images of like the vast landscapes with the sort of smaller little domicile or domestic tasks, and then yeah, I guess how are you conceiving all of those images being put together?
Well, for me, there was something that was really, you know, in translating like the, I guess, the way in which information is processed by a machine, which is not the way that it's, you know, understood by humans. It's not the same. It's not, it
Right,
can't even be called processed when
right.
it's human. And it really was kind of understanding, you know, just how machines understand information, and then how would they even create based on all these different videos. So I just imagined a lot of juxtaposition and a lot of kind of random events just
Mm-hmm.
colliding, you know. So for that piece, I experimented a lot. Like earlier versions of that were kind of more contained, not necessarily as juxtaposed. And then at one point I was just like, this needs to be free and go a little wild, and a lot of it was just like random.
Yeah, some of it is actually very noisy in
Mhm.
like the image, the colors, the way that it gets a little glitchy, and then noisy with all of the layers of voiceover. And so at one point, when it kind of gets to that, I just kind of sat and tried to stop trying to perceive every single syllable and every single pixel, right, every square inch of your frame, and just sort of see kind of step back and see the forest for the trees, huh? Right. But it is this sort of amazing kind of noise that comes out of it, which I thought was really kind of nice. Yeah.
Yeah, the noise was really important. I think oftentimes in communication, noise is seen as this kind of like, you know, thing that you're trying to avoid. Whereas in this creative process for that particular series, it was like all about finding a communication model that was just based on noise,
Mm-hmm.
and that could still kind of create some meaning and some articulation of ideas, but
Mm-hmm.
through that noise.
It's nice. It's really beautiful. Have you explored any other sort of sci-fi or sci-fi adjacent style of storytelling in any of your other work?
Yes. So once I did come into UCSD, I started another project, which is my most recent project, which was Lefas. And so that title comes from Paracelsus, who was this figure in the 17th century. And he was kind of into different things. He was into alchemy, and he was into like the cosmos and plants,
Mm-hmm.
um, and he called lefas the astral body of plants, and it could only be liberated in a process of burning, of applying fire and kind of like letting that property of the plant turn into something else. And so this project was also sci-fi. It was a narrative sci-fi, a little bit more structured in the narrative genre than Mission Series, which was narrative, but still kind of experimental in other ways. But with Lefas, it was strictly like, I'm going to make a film, with a script and with like storyboards and everything in this like kind of sci-fi way. But in this one in particular, I went in way of biology. I mean, biology also comes, from physics, from the study of all of that, right? But let's say that in Mission Series, it was more about time, it was more about outer space. And here it was more about molecules, cells, bodies interacting, not only intersubjectivities, but interobjectivities, because in the story, the person eats a plant and that creates its own, interactions on a material level, like on a body level.
Well, let's see. So maybe let's break down some of the some academic speech. What is what the hell is intersubjectivity?
You knew it was going to come up. Well, I mean, that's a whole thing that I think I'm still trying to understand. And now I'm kind of also wandering into what interobjectivity is. But I guess,
Yeah.
subjectivity is basically everything, because, a lot of the ways in which we interact with people. And in my case, I see plants and I'm touching my plant. You guys can't see it, but I have the plant that I used for my film right here. It sleeps next to me. And what I'm interested in is like mutual relationships, that acknowledge that plants and other beings that are more than human, um, have their own workings and their own forms of communication and their own subjective experiences that can't be framed within the subjective experiences of
Right.
humans, but don't make them not exist. So I guess in Lefas, I wanted the human to interact on an equal level with the plant, or at least try to give the plant its own agency. And that's what I'm referring to with the intersubjectivity.
What do you mean by give the plant its own agency?
Like, well, I mean, in terms of fiction, what I did was I gave the plant kind of plays its own role, it produces its own like noises, and it kind of uses its own tactics for having some kind of communication with this person, with the character, so that the character can eventually take the plant and take care of it and give it a home, which goes back to other research that has been done about like plants have their own, like even house plants like have their own strategies for being house plants, because it's like a survival thing, and like plants get you to do things for them,
Yeah.
in these like relationships that are established between plants, just as they are established between pets like
Yeah.
cats and dogs and people. I know myself included, and many people have real relationships with plants, and when your plant is like not doing well, and you're like, probably
Yeah.
because it's next to this other plant, and maybe and it's not like they don't get along like in the human sense, but maybe something that plant produces doesn't really go well with the other. So you move them around and you realize that really helped the plant. So they have their own way of kind of having some kind of communication.
Yeah, I name all of mine. Phyllis is the philodendron,
Of
obviously, you
course.
know.
Yeah, I have a philodendron. I call it Philly.
Oh, good. On the same wavelength there, but they all have names, they all have personalities for sure. And they get sick, and that makes me very sad. So I want to talk a little bit more about the Manifesto for Mission series, because you say At the very, very start of this, well, first of all, are all of these people real? Like Elena O, Eris, and Philip Adar? No, no.
No, those are all just, characters.
I love it. It's so good. But you say a few things that I think are incredibly incredibly relevant for the current situation. I hate calling it that, but it is this amazing uh, strange and kind of scary shared experience that everyone on the globe is experiencing at the same time. But you say at the very start of it, consider the following. Our complex human consciousness sets us apart from every other living thing. Our bodies propose biological and philosophical challenge, their history linked to change and survival, their tangible functions visceral and visual, and their intangible outcome liberating and generally unknown. And our presence in the universe is forever related to the diverse accidents between rock, water, and vegetation. And that to me was just like, whoa. That a fact that also seems to find metaphorical correspondence with the realities of our own unfolding as intelligent beings. And so I'm wondering for you if this new threat, this threat to human, is this current situation, is this current virus opening up a new line of interrogation for you? Are you considering this? Are you creating things that are in response to this? Is this how has this kind of changed your or not your line of inquiry?
Well, I guess something that we haven't touched on, but that has also become incredibly important for me, is climate justice
Yeah.
and social justice. So I am kind of like a self proclaimed eco-feminist, and I've been really doing a lot of research and really having a lot of inspiration in women like Wangari Maathai and Vandana Shiva, and just eco-feminists that really understand the links and the problems between patriarchy and capitalism
Mm-hmm.
um, and gender-based violence and injustice in general, and
Mm-hmm.
oppression not only of women but of things that are feminized,
Mm-hmm.
like anything that is less than male, or white male, in terms of
Yeah.
any kind of supremacy. And so these are topics that I already was considering and seeing, and really going deep into the connection between those practices and the destruction of the environment. And the destruction of the environment includes those relationships that can deteriorate, or those things that can happen, like this virus, because of that just unstable relation, because of that destruction, because of that, like, seeing animals as something that is just there for our service, disrupting the way in which an ecological view of the world should actually be perceived from every point of view, and how that affects people that are living marginalized, impoverished, people that are living in the city, everyone, but on
Mm-hmm.
different levels. And so I think that all of those topics are, you know, they've always been pressing and relevant, but of course, right now they just feel so like, okay, we need to wake up to this. And so
Right.
it really, not to say it in a pretentious way, but since I was already researching and kind of being in that state of mind, it's only been like, my God, like, like, yes, like it's more validating of, of those things that I'm doing and that I'm working on really matter, and just should keep being like that center point of my work.
Are you feeling some sense of optimism that because of this, it's going to take this a global pandemic to get some larger populations to kind of wake up and actually start to see their environment in a different way, to see their relationships with those that are different than them in a different way? Are you feeling optimism, Or do you think that anything can change? Maybe that's a bit of a headier question.
I do think so. And
Yeah,
without being insensitive to, what's happening to
yeah,
people and their health and, without being insensitive to those things, I do think that there are um, positive actions and different strategies for living that we can find from all of this. On an ecological level, it's been so good.
mm-hmm.
um, the decarbonization that has happened,
Yeah,
and just like the breathing room that we have given the earth again has just proves how we've just been doing things in the wrong way,
right.
just like someone just keeps beating a horse, and making it go and doesn't give it water and doesn't feed it and doesn't listen to its needs and doesn't see that a relationship is mutual,
Mm-hmm.
and so obviously like it's going to collapse, and I don't know if I guess I am positive about it. I think that if we, are attuned to these lessons, and to the real messages that are happening, and without being like extreme about them, because all of these things also have, just opened up like the eco-fascist,
Yeah,
kind of craziness,
yeah,
where it's like, oh, that's because we shouldn't let immigrants in and all that other stuff,
Jesus.
which is silly because I'm an immigrant,
It's
like
just silly.
just to think about
Yeah.
it. Just being careful of not becoming like extremist, but seeing how those things can just spark new conversations, new possibilities for adjusting and having interactions of care, of respect, of being mutual with the world, and
Right.
not just like, you know
Hierarchical and yeah, yeah.
exactly. Like good, bad, I am superior, you are
Mm-hmm.
inferior, and all of those things that come with patriarchal and those kinds of logics that just destroy.
Yeah, yeah. I also wanted to talk to you a little bit about, let me go through my notes. So, your piece at Working Title, Untitled Matter, which I think was this sensorial performance that at one point your whole body had become completely enmeshed with the tree, and maybe I was perceiving it and I was just having a really good time, but at one point it seemed a little like you were making out with it.
A little bit.
A little bit. It went there. So
I
what?
mean,
Go ahead.
there's definitely, excuse me, I don't know. That's my bear. Sorry. One of those things about, no,
Hi.
one of those things about like this whole thing is like the limits are like not there, and it's kind
Yep.
of like you just have to work with it, and
Yep.
you know but yeah, that there were lots of different influences that I was having in that period. I was teaching a performance class, and I was taking a performance class, and I was like, there was a lot of, not necessarily, I mean, there was an ecosexual component to it, but and then I was watching way too much Marina Abramovich, like kind of
Like
perform,
you do in grad school, you know?
and then there was the Chipko movement, which is this Indian conservation movement from the 70s. And one of their most iconic activist actions was that a group of women and girls hugged these trees so that these loggers wouldn't cut them down, because
Mm-hmm.
they came during a time that they knew that the men weren't around, so that they thought that they could like scare the women and they could cut the trees. And what the women did was hug the trees, and they wouldn't move, and they stayed there until the men came back and saved, a bunch of trees. And well, that organization just saved many trees in general. But so I had all these questions, and then there was also the question of materiality, which is why it's called Untitled Matter. And I just really wanted to just go in and feel like it was just human matter. It was just organic matter that eventually just became matter.
Yeah.
It was just, and so I did kind of want to merge. And I guess there's something, that is sensual about that, because in that merging, you really have to surrender and, just kind of try to, in a very sensorial way, become and also kind of let the other matter become you. And it
Hmm.
was amazing. I had the best time.
It was so
I
beautiful.
still remember and think about it. And because, well, one additional component that, like, I don't know if you knew this, but when I got there to do the first performance, this man that worked at the church was like, "Oh yeah, did you know that there are many people buried right here?" And I was like,
That was
no, I did
Walter.
not. I did not know that. But for me, that was awesome because I was also exploring all these like life, like birth and death,
Hmm.
symbolic things with the other performances that I was doing and the research that I was doing. So when I was like, oh my God, it was like kind of like a present. I was like,
Yeah.
there's dead matter like right here, and so it became this just kind of exploration of the tree has probably absorbed that
Yeah.
matter, and then I'm letting it absorb me in some way, and I'm absorbing it. So it
Yeah.
became this kind of like just, entangled, expressive, just, well,
Ecosexual is, I think, the phrase you use, which is really brilliant. Yeah, it was mesmerizing. It was so good. I sat there for a solid, maybe 15 or so minutes, as long as I could, and it was just so and the pacing, because every gesture, it was like molasses. You started on the kneelers and had performed this like this sort of reverence to the tree, this gesture, and then you slowly make your way in, and then the way that you cut your the footage for this sofa series, that people can see it, is that how it zooms into your toes, just kind of like, it's like they're just getting way inside the dirt and the bark, and I loved it. I thought it was so good, so good.
And
And then
thank you. That's really great because I really didn't know. Like, I first I lost track of time, and then because I was like, immersed with the tree, I didn't know if anyone was actually there. Like,
mm-hmm.
sometimes I would finish because I did it 3 days, like, and I'd be like, no one probably saw it. I just probably did this for myself,
Yeah.
but and which was fine,
Yeah.
but I didn't know. I couldn't see.
Yeah.
I think just one time there was this moment where I felt like someone had kneeled at one of the kneelers,
Mm-hmm.
and I kind of felt like I was being watched, but it was like a brief moment, and then that was it.
Have you explored much performance art before?
Um, I guess this past quarter, this last year, I've been doing more
Mm-hmm.
performance art and being more interested in experimenting with it. I like to put myself in positions where I don't necessarily feel like I have like it all figured out,
Yeah.
like discomfort zone.
Yeah.
Um, at least in some aspects, in the creative aspect, I try to do that.
Yeah.
And but I did do acting a very long time ago, so I've had some kind of training in terms of like the body.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why I became interested in performance again is because I was really considering like the materials that I was using for my work. And I was like, I don't want to use, it was like a phase where I was really like, what materials do I want to use as an artist in terms of sustainability and pollution and,
Mm-hmm.
plastic and like energy and all of that stuff. And I was like, well, my body is already like, I'm already sustaining my body for all these other things. I might as well use my body as the material for, to make art. And
Yeah.
that's when I became more interested in the, using my body in order to make art.
Do you think you'll explore that more?
Yeah,
Good.
absolutely. Yes. And I actually I've I use my voice a lot, so I perform a lot with my voice.
Mm-hmm.
For my films, I usually do a lot of voiceover, and in my installations, I always include some kind of sound, and sometimes it's my voice. And um, I probably will do some acting for my second film. I did some for my first film, but I ended up like not including that. But yeah, there's a part of me that's really interested in movement and body and just using my own materiality.
Are you when looking at your performance in your previous work, are you able to look at your body in that space and in a scene or whatever, you are you able to separate the subjective from the objective, or do you go down the path of like, oh my God, I can't, I look so dumb, I sound stupid,
It's a difficult process. I mean, and
mm,
there's this performance that I was working on right when I was doing this before I did this one for working title. It was called The Birth and Death of Telepathine, which is a character in my second film. And it was all about like mediation, like
mm,
it from turning from plant to human. And so it
mm-hmm,
was all about this, like, it was like this metamorphic, like weird, like, and I would cry and I would scream, and I worked on it for a whole quarter, and it was very uncomfortable. It made me extremely sensitive for the whole quarter
mm-hmm,
because I was really digging deep and then being so vulnerable in front of so many people and trying to separate myself from like what was actually happening and the fear, the social anxiety that it creates, which
mm-hmm.
comes really easy to me.
Yeah.
So it's a process of being very vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
um I guess, yeah, that's performance art for you,
That's
it's like
it.
you're right there, and sometimes you're like not in situations that you want people to see from you, but you get to these really interesting, like, just like complex places that
Mm-hmm.
end up being worth it.
Right, right. I mean, did you find by the end of Untitled Matter, the three performances, did you find that the piece had changed through the performance? Did you find that your reaction to the space, to the place, to the tree itself, to the ground surrounding it, did your and even your own perception of your body in it, did any of that change? Did you feel a little liberated? Did you feel even more self-conscious? And yeah, what was that like?
Yeah, there was definitely a change. And to be honest, this is like, it was so weird because the 3 days that I did that performance were like the most peaceful sleep afterwards.
Really?
It wasn't something that I was looking for, like any therapeutic, like kind of,
Bonus.
but those 3 nights, and I'm like, I dream a lot, and I usually dream every night. It's
Yeah,
like, okay, I'm going to work in the land of subconscious now,
yeah.
or unconscious. But those nights, it was like, oh, I really rested. There was nothing else there.
You didn't need to work through anything after the fact. It had
Honestly.
just.
And there was, when the person came over and told me that there were, that this was a cemetery, basically, it did
Yep.
freak me out a little bit because I do have like a lot of respect for death, and like find that fine line between like, is that a ghost? All of that stuff that comes from this just tradition of I think a lot of South American and Central American cultures have that, and of course other cultures in the world, but
Yeah.
definitely from my own experience being South American, there's always some ghost that's following you or some curse, you know.
Yeah.
And So it was kind of scary, but also I started just seeing it in a different way, just kind of being more cerebral about it, and uh, kind of trying to detach from those fears and think of it more in terms of what I was really going for, which was the material and the mutuality of it,
Mm.
you know. And so it did change, and it changed every night. It was a little bit different, and I found some different side of the tree that I maybe hadn't explored. And sometimes, like, there was one day where it was very fragrant, and there was another night where there was an owl in the tree. And
Whoa.
so, like, that kind of like another life and another kind of, you know, materiality and like
Yeah.
being and sentiency and kind of living in the tree kind of transformed the experience too. And so each night was different.
Yeah. How would you, so I think we've talked a lot about performance art as though everybody knows exactly what performance art is. And I think people kind of confuse that phrase for just anybody who does a performance of anything. So, but it's, which it can be, yeah. But what really is performance art, and how does that differ from doing a performance for a video or a performance in, singing or playing an instrument, or what is performance art?
Well, I think, I mean, that can be debated in so many ways, but I think that it's kind of, I would say it's the most like one of the most transgressive like practices, because it's like, in order for performance art to really develop, there it was like, okay, this is a painting, this is on the wall.
Hmm.
And when performance art comes says like the body and kind of like pierces through like the canvas. And I'm paraphrasing my professor. um, uh, it's like, what? The body
The
is
body.
art. And the body is there also to point fingers and name names and
Hmm.
say like, this is wrong, or
Yeah.
this is weird, or this is, it always has this like very confrontational message to deliver.
Right.
And a lot of the times, I mean, I guess not all performance art, but a lot of performance art is like raw, and there's like nudity, and there's like, some kind of cathartic
Yeah,
situation
something
going
is
on.
getting destroyed, like, Marina Abramovich, the screaming piece, right? Or cut piece from Yoko Ono, right?
Yeah.
Like something, there has to be some sort of taking down
Hmm.
of some structure, something. And you're right, it is like this, like, super catharsis.
And
Uh,
what the body means,
yeah.
because the body is like permeable and leaky, and it has orifices, and it's weird, and
Yeah.
you know and so when you call your body art, when you call it into that kind of like sacred, constructed,
Hmm.
experimental arena, and it's like your body, with all these things that are questionable from so many different places. And when it's, when your organs become art and everything about
Yeah.
you becomes art, it's like it really challenges conventions and makes people uncomfortable a lot.
Yeah, yeah, I think that is definitely, I think, people's revulsion, or like sort of like meh, because it is a very, very uncomfortable situation. And every performance of a performance art piece, I find myself this sort of physical empathy, right? I feel like I'm kind of taking on whatever the experience that they're putting their body through. I as the viewer, it's like I'm an active participant in whatever it is that they're doing, and I'm part of that performance too. And so it also, for me, it's like very, very conversational with the viewer, the whoever is looking at me, or
Mm-hmm.
me as a viewer looking at someone. And so it's like nobody likes going to dinner theater because they don't want to be like part of the show, like they don't want to be brought up on stage and hypnotized in front of people and made a fool of. And so I think that people can find that pretty off-putting, but I find it really liberating. I think it's really interesting to sort of engage, and how much of that engagement of the destruction of something am I willing to be a part of, and is it and finding like the lines of spectator and person doing the thing. Those lines are
Exactly.
constantly just like
Those things are being negotiated.
tossed.
I mean,
Yeah.
with some artists, those agreements like come up front, like,
Mm-hmm.
this is my space,
Yeah.
but a lot of them are this kind of agreement where you don't know.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of vulnerability, sometimes on both sides, sometimes only on one. And
Right.
sometimes that vulnerability and that kind of human kind of what are you going to do with that vulnerability is what's at stake a lot
Mm-hmm.
of times and what makes it uncomfortable.
Yeah. I think it's powerful, a powerful mode of expression. Well, Carolina, thank you so much for talking with me.
Thank you. This was an awesome conversation.
Oh, I'm
Yeah, it's
so
like,
glad.
yeah.
I was so nervous about all of these, putting it all together, but I'm having such a good time just getting to know everybody's different points of views, and just to talk about art and music and what it all means, and yeah, and just kind of checking in to see how everybody's doing. It's been illuminating, and I'm super glad you made the time. So thank you so much.
No, of course. This is great, and I'm just any opportunity to talk through ideas is always going to bring something. As long as you're like genuinely going into the conversation, which I absolutely think we did,
Okay.
is just it leaves something good for everyone.
Thank
As
you.
long as it's yeah. So thank you, and thank you to everyone at Project Blank, and thanks to whoever is watching.
Yeah, thanks for watching these little Shaynas diving into our little psyches. All right, thank you so much, and
Okay.
bye.